Hey, Ms. Bahak here. Welcome to an episode of the Habit Chest podcast. If this is your first time here on this show, we like to talk about building wealth without trading health and really just training the mind and body for entrepreneurship. So one of the things in this episode that I want to focus on is strict pull-ups. The reason I'm focusing on this is because in my 10 plus year career as a fitness coach, I got to work with Fortune 500 execs, military and law enforcement, people with back injuries, professional athletes, you name it. And there was a common goal that in each group, no matter what background, what athletic level they came from, there was a constant. People wanted to be able to do more pull-ups. They wanted to increase their capacity to do so. For whatever reason, it helped make people feel strong. It helped them feel light and agile and in control of their bodies. And so I got really good at being able to help people do this. Now, when I left my coaching career and I moved on to starting my own business, this was in September, October of 2020. And I really, I went hard. I went hard into chasing and building wealth. And I did trade my health at that time. And I'm not very proud of it. And that's partly why I, center a lot of what we talk about on this show around that. But one of the things that I noticed was pulling is one of the hardest patterns for you to work on if you are, you have a home gym or a garage gym or something like that, right? Or you're working out with no equipment. Let's say that's the case. Upper body pulling is a very difficult pattern to do because if you think about all of the movements that are typically done, body weight workouts, right? Push-ups, burpees, things like that, they are all pushing movements, right? And the pulling pattern is something that unless like now I have a TRX, for example, right? The TRX band that allows me to do horizontal upper body pulling if I'm ever working out at home. But for this time period of a few years, I had stopped doing pull-ups. Like I just didn't have access to a pull-up bar where I worked out. And, maybe I was doing rows and things like that with dumbbells, but not as often, right? And so finally, a few years later, when my gym got access to a pull-up bar, I was like super excited because that's the one piece of equipment that it's kind of janky when you try to you do it yourself and have one. I mean, I did have that as well. And it was one of those things that left marks on my walls and that kind of thing. It was annoying. So I was excited for it to be in a separate place in a gym that I could access. And I remember hopping on the pull-up bar thinking like, yo, I still got it, right? And I remember feeling like I was 500 pounds. Like I just felt so heavy hanging on the bar where I was like, yo, yes, there's the decondition part, right? If you haven't been training for a little while, like you'll feel a little out of breath. You'll feel like, wow, I could use some cardio, right? But there's something when you're hanging on a pull-up bar for dear life. And you're like, dude, I used to be able to hang up here for minutes on end, right? There were two core assessments that I would do with my clients. And I obviously ran myself through this many times too. But the first one was an active bar hang. Okay, so the active bar hang is something where you hang on the bar and you're not passive, right? You're not just like letting yourself dangle and being super relaxed. You're trying to be active. You're trying to keep those shoulder blades packed back and down. You're trying to keep your core tight, try to keep yourself in a, pretty strong position, right? Grip strength is being worked on and trained. And so being able to do that for at least 1 minute unbroken was kind of a marker that we would look at. And so to give you context on how much I had lost, by the way, because it's like, I don't want it to sound deceiving, like I never had pull-ups or something. And here's how I got it back in such a short amount of time, right? To give you the context, I was able to do the minute unbroken of the active bar hang, even after these few years, right? But I could vividly remember the difference of how hard it was feeling now versus how hard it used to feel, right? And I didn't like that. And if I did attempt pull-ups, which I did at that time, when I was doing this a few years later, I could do maybe two, Okay. And that was also even after I did two, it was the kind of thing where I would be sore. Like my whole traps, my neck, everything was super sore the next day. Right. And you could tell I was just not engaging the right muscles that needed to be engaged to be able to do consecutive strict pull ups. So um, that period of kind of trying, I had decided already in my mind, I'm like, all right, this is one of the things I'm going to get great at again. Like this needs to come back because to me, this would make me feel partly in shape, right? So I felt myself being taken back to what I was helping dozens and dozens of people with in my coaching career. Like, how did you over time progress and improve pull-ups? I want to use this opportunity as a chance to share with you how I did it, and with some nuances on how you might do it if you're in a position where you want to increase your capacity for pull-ups. I'm going to give you a very easy progressive formula to follow. So number one is, as soon as I realized, dude, I'm so sore after I do a couple of these, I'm not using the right muscles. I need to just focus on hanging for a while. And that is something I recommend everybody do and get good at, right? Because first of all, the thing that has been revealed in the last couple of years, which is super interesting, which wasn't really around 10, 20 years ago, was how grip strength is an actual, indicator factor of longevity, right? And it totally makes sense because you think about opening a jar, opening a doorknob, being able to have function of your fingers and being able to apply pressure, those kinds of things affect a lot of day-to-day activities, right? So working on your upper body pulling doesn't always have to be in the form of pull-ups, but I'm going to share with you how you can use, because the closer you are to the pull-up bar and using that, to train the pattern, it does translate a little bit better and you do gain more capacity quicker, right? So the first thing I would do is active bar hangs. So being able to, and if you can't do active bar hangs, right, it's doing passive bar hangs at first. So it's being able to just get yourself up there, hang, use a band or use something to assist you so that you can, accumulate, I would say, at least 20 seconds, 30 seconds at a time of hanging. Because you will find, and I had clients like this too, where it's the hanging part, it's we can't even accumulate 20 seconds yet because after 3 to 5 seconds, the grip is giving out, right? So if you find yourself in that position, regress it and take it one step back and focus on something like holding super heavy dumbbells that you can handle by your side, like a farmer's walk, right? If you're doing that, what you're going to notice is that it's taxing your grip in a similar way, right? Of course, arms aren't raised, gravity's not pulling down in that same exact way. But you will find that you can really max out training your grip with just dumbbells. And that is actually more worthwhile at a certain point as you are trying to build up the ability to hang for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, right? And then from there, you can transition yourself to the bar, do passive hangs or active bar hangs, or do a combination of both. But the point here is that the type of strength that you're training is isometric. Okay, so isometric strength and training is really when you are not, there's no explosive action happening. You're really staying still, right? The muscle fibers aren't shortening or lengthening. They're kind of in a fixed position or fighting to be in that fixed position. So planks and side planks and, things like that are also isometric work, right? So that is typically one of the first things to do if you find yourself unable to be anywhere near a pull-up, but you do want to be doing some someday. Accumulate a lot of time under this to the point that you can really handle a minute unbroken. And as you are chasing that route of hanging on for 1 minute and feeling really good about it, notice what your max is to even start, right? So if you're finding, okay, it's about 15 seconds, you have something objective now that you're trying to improve every time you get yourself back on the bar, right? So I did that. I did just isometric hangs and things like that for a while. I would do them in between a lot of the other lifting that I was doing. I was trying to get my triceps and my chest back a little bit. So I was doing a lot of, pushing work. So in between those sets, I would add in a pulling movement, which was really just the hang. Okay. And it was like kind of like active rest, but a little bit of work at the same time for me. Now, phase 2, once you have kind of mastered that a little bit, is definitely going to be eccentric work, right? So the negatives, if you've ever heard of pull-up negatives, help a ton. And I found that a lot of my clients would get bored of these, right? It is a boring type of activity in a way, but it's extremely effective. The ones who could get past the boredom and actually focus on this would go a long way. They would gain strength much, much quicker. And the eccentric type of training is really the lowering of a movement, right? The down portion. So in a squat, it would be you getting down into the squat. That's the eccentric portion. You coming up is the concentric portion. So the eccentric portion in a pull-up is the same thing. We're coming down, right? But to come down, you have to go up first somehow. So the way that you do this is by typically using the assisted bands. Okay. So if you have a band that you can kind of step into and you can get yourself up there and it's, giving you enough support where you're not burning out all of the muscles right away, you're going to be able to get some good reps in. The rep ranges for that should be 2 to 4, 3 to 5, 4 to 6. You can increase your capacity as your body allows you to, but starting with something like 2 to 4 may even tax you, enough. So that's one method. The other thing is you could just jump up, right? You could jump up to the top and then slowly lower yourself back down. And the point with these is that you don't have to pull yourself up. In fact, you're trying to save your muscles from the work they do when they have to actually pull up. Okay, that's going to be trained in a different session or segment, right? So you're focusing just on taxing that negative, right, which is the coming down portion. If you focused on just that for a little while and you did that a couple times a week, that builds up a lot of strength where things come back quickly. I will admit, I did not do as much of that. Like I didn't do straight negatives. What I would do is after the bar hang happened, I started to notice that, okay, I can now do about 5 strict pull-ups, okay? If I'm really tired, like I've done a couple sets of 5, what I would start to notice is those bad habits would creep back in, which is, oh man, I'm using a lot of my traps and my neck, and it's like I feel wrecked the next day. But what I found is from just focusing on adding a little more of the negative portion, right? So I would go hard and try to get myself chin above the bar, right? But I would always spend an extra second or two lowering myself down, even though I know I could have done maybe 8 reps or 10 reps unbroken if I sped it up and didn't do that lowering thing, right? But when you are training and building strength, it is super important to focus on eccentric work. It really expedites things in a way, that just going hard with the concentric stuff just won't do it, right? So once I got myself up to 5 pull-ups, which was like, whoa, okay, cool. This is feeling a little more like myself again. And I'll tell you that it only took like a couple weeks, if I'm being honest, before things started to really come back. Now, keep in mind, this was consistent, like almost every session, like 4 or 5 days out of the week, if I'm working out, like almost in every single session, I was trying to utilize the bar in some way. So some days I was doing straight pull-ups. Some days I was doing just the hangs if I felt really sore and heavy and that kind of thing, right? But once you can get yourself to a place where it's like, okay, this is my max. I can now do 5 pull-ups. I was doing them unassisted, but let's say you're doing it assisted with a band or something like that, right? To be able to leave a couple reps in the tank is key for working sets. Okay, so I could technically, if I maxed out, I would be doing 8 or 10. if I was a little fresher in the session. I could do that, right? But I would purposefully stop at 5 because I wanted to save a tiny bit of energy so I could do another set in a little bit, right? So in total, I was likely doing more volume by doing the sets of 5 than I would have if I did 8 or 10 right out the bat. Because what happens, because it's such a pure strength type movement, is that you'll do 8 or 10 in the first set, but then after that, you're doing 2s, you're doing 1s, you're doing 3s. It's like very inconsistent, right? So I found pick the number, assisted or unassisted, that you feel like you can do and you can replicate over and over, set by set. And so I stuck to that number, sets of 5, for literally weeks and weeks on end. I knew I could do more, but instead what I would do is just knock out another set instead of trying to squeeze in a couple extra reps, right? So here's what happens. Over the weeks, like, okay, a month has gone by, a month and a half has gone by. Now I'm like, yo, like these sets of 5 feel pretty easy, like not just effortless, right? It still felt like work, but it felt way easier, where I was like, oh, no sweat, I could knock out another one if I want to. That is the point that you're trying to get to in a working set when you are building your pull-ups, okay? Is like, where's the sweet spot here where I'm not just so like maxed out, like I'm testing myself, but I'm actually in training mode. Where can I stop? Where it's like, it was just enough work, stimulated me, but I have a minute or two to recover while I go hit the bench press, right? And when I come back, I'll be able to do another set of 5. That I found very useful. It does require putting your ego to the side a little bit and just focusing on getting in quality reps instead of like looking cool doing another 5 or another 10. But after doing this for, I would say it's been now like, it's definitely been several months, okay? After several months, like over 3 months, now what I begin to notice is like, dude, my whole total capacity of what I could knock out in a session has dramatically shot up. Like maybe I was doing 20 reps total, right? In terms of pull-ups accumulated, 5 at a time, whatever. Now I'm starting to notice, dude, I can do 50. Like I can do 10 sets. And the way I would do this is like not just hang out by the pull-up bar and do it, all back to back, but I would superset it with whatever else I was doing. So if I'm doing, flies, okay, cool. In between each of those sets, I'm going to go knock out 5 pull-ups, right? Then once I hit 50, I've been doing that for a little while. Okay, every session I'm going to try to actually now, instead of doing so much of just the hanging and things like that, the eccentric work, now I'm doing full reps. Okay, so every session that I come into the gym, even if I did it the day before, I'm like, you know what? If I'm feeling good, my, joints feel good, everything, I'm going to do it again. Okay. And it really, before you know it, it's almost like, okay, maybe it took a total of like 4 months to come back to a place where you're like, wow, I'm in better shape with my pull-ups specifically than I was maybe even a couple years back. Like, and I think part of it, right, is the fact that you do have to put in some density, right? So I would have clients all the time that maybe they would work on it once or twice a week, okay? But when you are trying to build a new skill or get back a skill and build back even better, right, you need sometimes outrageous amounts of input. And this is by no means outrageous, right? Doing 5 at a time or whatever. But you do need to put in input, and it does require multiple times a week, or else what you're going to notice is like by the time you come back on Monday, if the last time you did it was the last Monday, it's like there's not enough progress happening. You're not able to tap into the skill enough to basically be able to, improve as rapidly as you might want. So anyways, now I'm at a point where this is the little touch that I've added to it, because if you do only concentric work in any movement, right, not just in pull-ups, but if you do only like aggressive, explosive stuff, one of the things that I found in my years of training and coaching was that a lot of joint pain and inflammation and things that would come about were because there was a lack in the isometric and eccentric department, and there was an over favoring of the concentric movement in that department. And so a very easy way that this would balance out a lot of time was if you gave people isometric stuff and eccentric stuff, but isometric in particular. Because at a certain point when people are super advanced, it's like they can't think back to the last time they did a plank or they did, an active bar hang, right? You're in your mind that becomes like, oh, this is a warm-up type movement, like this is not actual training, right? But it can actually be incorporated into your training in a way that makes you stronger total if you give the movement the respect it deserves, right? So here's what I did. I basically, after the 5 pull-ups, instead of doing 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 that I could have, I would do the 5. And then I would basically lower myself super, super, super slow, like the slowest negative that you've ever seen. And then at the bottom, I would basically just hang, right? And in an active way, I wasn't just passive, but in an active bar hang, I would end with a max hang. So I would hang on for as long as my grip would possibly let me and kind of max that out. That is not doing crazy amounts of damage that's going to take you days and days to recover from. And, oh man, like I can't lift my arms after this. It's just the right amount of pushing and maxing out on a segment or portion of the movement that allows you to actually feel stronger, build real strength, like you will objectively when you test and look at different parts of your capacity. You'll see that it does improve. But because you're already fatigued, you just did 5 pull-ups. Now, the max hang that I'm doing, okay, like I don't need to hang there for a full minute or 2 minutes. It's like I'm going to get tired after 20 seconds probably, right? Because I've just pumped out 5 or whatever. So adding a negative to, like, after you've done the 5 fast ones or the 10 fast ones that you want to do, right? Adding the negative is 1. And 2, adding a max hang at the end of each of your sets. So even if you're doing 2 negatives, right? You're doing 2 negative pull-ups and that's considered 1 set for you. What you can do is do the 2 negatives, but end it in a max hang. So while you're up there, try to hang on for as long as you can. And trust me, I know it feels dumb. It feels dumb at first because you kind of feel like funny. You're like, man, I can't hang on for more than like 2 seconds, right? But what you'll notice is this very practice of like just hanging on for a second longer is the thing that actually helps improve that. There are all these assistance methods that I told you earlier that you probably already should have knocked out, right? By the time that you're trying this, which is, doing the farmer's walks or farmer's holds, like holding on to heavy things and taxing your grip in that way, using bands as your assistance, right? Or things like that. But don't discredit yourself if you can only hang on for 5 seconds and you used to not be able to hang on for more than a second. That is progress, right? So that's the one thing that I want to leave you with here is like pull-ups are relative, okay? So you can't compare your pull-ups to like, what someone else is doing because it gets depressing very quickly, right? So the numbers that you're looking at and you're dealing with, like you might have, I dealt with plenty of folks who were like, oh yeah, my goal, I want to pass that marker of being able to do 3 pull-ups, right? No, I think the number was 3 pull-ups at a specific tempo, right? It was like 3 seconds lowering, 1 second, chin above the bar, like super, super controlled. You're showing control throughout the movement. Being able to hit that goal is something that, you can set for yourself in the beginning. I want to knock out 3 of those kind of pull-ups. Or like me, my goal that I set was I want to be able to do sets of 10 unbroken pull-ups, right? Not just 10 and then I'm done, but like I could do a set of 10, go back to my bench, come back to another set of 10, go back to my bench, come back to another set of 10. And I can do that over and over and over the same way that I just repeated 5 consecutively, right? So that's the thing I want you to keep in mind when you're training your pull-ups, especially if you're doing it in a gym. You might feel funny, right? You might feel funny because you're like, man, I'm flailing around. I don't look like I have control, right? That's why I think that reducing the anxiety and being productive in an actual way is doing these active bar hangs, right? And then doing things where you're trying to exhibit control of your own body, okay? Letting go of the numbers, not worrying about doing dozens and dozens, but what you're trying to do is get to the place where you feel like you're maxing yourself out a little bit, right? And that happens pretty quickly. Like with pull-ups, you don't have to like try to max out. It just kind of, it happens, right? So those are some things to think about. And the final thing is if you have access to a lat pull down machine and you have access to a horizontal cable row, right? So the type that when you're pulling back like this, if you have access to both of those machines, they are incredible at helping you improve the total capacity of your pull-up. So what I would do on certain days where I was a little too beat up to kind of stimulate the pulling more, right? Because I would do the hangs, the active bar hangs, but I was like, okay, I need something a little more to work on my pulling. I would do the lat pull downs, right? The lat pull downs are very great because you're mimicking the exact same movement pattern with just some more control points, right? There's pads above my knees. It's not gonna take me up in the air, right? I can actually control the weight. I can, do behind the neck. I could do in front of the neck. I could do reverse grip. I could do normal grip. I could do wide grip. I could do narrow grip. There's so many ways that you can train your pulling pattern by using that machinery. And then, like I said, filling in your horizontal pulling. Okay, that's another area. Like I bench a lot, right? Dumbbell bench all the time. But that does need to be counterbalanced with the horizontal aspect as well. So I hope this was useful. Reach out if you have any questions. Check out all the free tools and all the good stuff that I have in the description below. I appreciate you taking the time, and I will see you on the next one.